So here's another way of thinking about it. You don't just need one way of looking at the world. Maybe you need two ways of looking at the world, and I'm not exactly sure how they should be related to one another, like which should take precedence under which circumstance. But one problem is, what's the world made of? You know, what's the world conceptualized as an objective place made of? And the other is, how should you conduct yourself while you're alive? And there's no reason to assume that those questions can be answered using the same approach. I mean, physics has its methods, and chemistry has its methods, and biology has its methods. So a method for obtaining the truth can be bound to a domain. So why would we necessarily assume that you could use the same set of tools to represent the world as a place of objects and to represent it as a place in which a biological creature would act? I mean, anyways, I'm suggesting that we don't view it that way, that we have two different viewpoints. Maybe they can be brought together, although it's not obvious how, but that it's not a tenable solution to get rid of one in favor of the other. And I think the reason for that is that you need to know how to conduct yourself in the world. You have to have a value system. You can't even look at the damn world without a value system. It's not possible. Your emotional health is dependent on a value system. The way you interact with other people is dependent on a value system. There's no getting away from it. And you say, well, there's no justification for any value system from a scientific perspective. You're going to draw that conclusion that no value system is valid. Where the hell does that leave you? There's no down, there's no up, there's no rationale for moving in any direction. There's not even really any rationale for living, and so people say things like that. Well, why the hell should I care what happens in a million years? Who's going to know the difference? It's like, yeah, true, stupid, but true. And the reason I think it's stupid is because it's just a game. You know, I can take anything of any sort and find a context in which it's irrelevant. It's just a rational game. It's like, who cares if 100 children freeze to death in a blizzard? What difference is it going to make a billion years? Well, what do you say to someone who says that? You say, well, seems like the wrong frame of reference, bucko. That's what it looks like to me. You know, because at some point you question the damn frame of reference, not what you derive from it. And it certainly seems to me that situations like that don't allow you to use that kind of frame of reference. There's something inhumane about it. And that trumps the logic, or at least it should. And if it doesn't, then all hell breaks loose, and that doesn't seem to be a good thing. Okay, so I have this quote from Shakespeare here. He says, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. Well, it's the sort of thing that you'd expect a dramatist to pen, but that's how he looked at the world. And we still watch Shakespeare's plays some hundreds of years later because there seems to be something essential captured in them. Something about how people do act, but more importantly, I think, how people should and shouldn't act. Because what fun is it going to a play that doesn't outline how someone should and how someone shouldn't act? You want a good guy, or a couple of them. Maybe they can be complex interminglings of good and bad, you know, that makes it more sophisticated. And you want a bad guy, or a bad, you know, you always want to see that contrasted, either within a character or between characters. And it's because you want to know how to live properly, that's how to be a good person, and you want to know how to live improperly, how to be a bad person, so you can watch out for people like that, or so you can figure out what that means for yourself. It's compelling, and that's another thing that's worth thinking about. Why is it compelling? And it's compelling to everyone. That's the thing that's so cool, is that there aren't that many phenomena that you can point to that are compelling to everyone. Music is close. It's a very rare person who doesn't like at least some genre of music, no matter how narrow. But the other one is stories. You're hard pressed to find someone, especially if they're younger, who doesn't like stories. Why? Is it a waste of time? Or is there something going on? Well, I think it's not only not a waste of time, it's actually the most fundamentally important thing you can possibly do, because there's no difference between understanding stories and figuring out how to get along in the world. So, and there's a tight relationship between the story that you inhabit that structures your behavior, and the games that Piaget talked about that organize people's behavior. You know, to some degree, the reason that we can all sit in this room together like this is because a huge chunk of the value system that guides our behavior is shared. So I'm lecturing and you're sitting in the classroom, and that distinguishes us to some degree, but you know that that's partly merely a consequence of the difference in our age. It's the same trajectory, we just happen to occupy different positions in a value hierarchy that we both accept. And so as long as you feel that that's fair and just, then you're not going to object to it. But I'm here in the classroom for many of the same reasons that you're here in the classroom. If you look at the higher order parts of the value structure, and maybe right out at the end of that, because I've tried to figure out, if you push why you're doing what you're doing right now to its ultimate limit, so you can't get a story that's superordinate to that, it's something like, well, you believe that the investigation of the world to acquire knowledge is worthwhile. Otherwise, what the hell are you here for? And even if, you know, 80% of your motivation is to get a good, stable job, fair enough, there's still something outside of that, because the whole culture says, well, you're more likely to be able to function properly in a good, stable job if you're the sort of person who knows how to go out in the world and forage for information usefully. And I think that's very much analogous to the hero story. It's like you go out and you search the unknown to find something of value. And so fundamentally that's what we're doing in the classroom, and the reason we can all organize our behavior is because we accept that framework. Consciously would be we know how to articulate it. Unconsciously it's, well, it doesn't matter, we know how to act out the patterns. Whether we can say the rules or not, doesn't matter. Same as a wolf pack. We know the procedures, and you could describe them with an articulated value structure.